Shadows of Yog Sottoth. Session 40. The Haunted House. Wanting to gain access to the higher orders of the Order of the Silver Twilight is not an easy thing. First of all, you need to become a master. To become a master in the Order of the Silver Twilight, you need an invitation. How do you get that invitation? Well, it became apparent that to get that invitation you needed to do something for the Order, or you needed a lot of money. You needed something that would get everybody's attention. Josiah had been approached by a landowner that there was a house that had been left vacant for a number of years in downtown Boston. Josiah was asked to go and investigate this house, as there had been reports that it was haunted, and indeed, if it was haunted, to do something about it. So, setting off, he and his associates, including a priest, went to see this house. They'd already done a few different investigations into the background of the property. They'd found out that there was somebody that used to live there called Walter Corbett, who in their last will and testament had asked to be buried in the basement of the property. This was some years ago, back in the previous century in fact, and since then various other people had actually gone to the house and tried to live there. Families, with all of them suffering the same fate of ill health or mental collapse. Arriving at the house, our adventurers proceeded to look through the ground floor. On first glance, there seemed to be very little there apart from dust and debris. However, in one of the rooms was discovered a number of books, of which one of them was some strange tome written in some odd language that would have to be deciphered later. The other two books were more interesting. Written in the hand of Walter Corbett, these were his diaries, and they started to indicate the strange warped mind of the man. Who was this person? They seemed to be trying to communicate with entities outside of our understanding, outside of our realm. It looked dangerous just to even read these books. It felt dangerous to do so, and indeed it was, as those people, after only a few minutes of reading the strange, weird and eerie words, started to feel colder, started to feel more ill at ease. There were other things in there as well, names of creatures or entities that they'd never heard of. What were these things? Whilst the majority of the group were searching the ground floor, the judge and the author decided that they would take a little bit of a detour and head downstairs. Finding the basement stairs, they made their way down. It seemed a slightly irrational thing to do, and the others later, when they eventually managed to get out of this house, did comment on this. But at the time, it was all good fun. There wouldn't be any problems. After all, there's no such thing as a haunted house. Getting down to the basement, they saw that there was a storeroom there, covered in debris, flotsam and jetsam from many, many years that had gone by. Inside the storeroom there was a coal bunker as well. Overall, nothing too unusual. But, looking through the debris, the author managed to find something stashed away in a small box. It looked to be some type of blade, some type of ceremonial-looking dagger. It was covered in a brown-red rust, which on first glance seemed to be some type of metal corrosion, but, rubbing the rust, it was seen to be that it must have been dried blood from years and years ago. This sent a shiver down the spines of both the judge and the author. Looking at each other, they decided to move on and see if they could find something else. At the same time, upstairs, the rest of our adventurers were spending their time looking through the diaries and beginning to start to fathom exactly what this Walter Corbett gentleman must have been about. Back in the basement, the judge said, "Well, what is going on here? The room is not really big enough to justify the fact that the rest of the house is much, much larger." So going over to the dry wall and using the butt of his gun, he punched a hole through the lath and plaster boards and saw that behind that, using their torch to illuminate the wall beyond, there was a message scrawled in the darkness. The message read, "Chapel of Contemplation, our Lord, granter of secrets," echoing the cult that was discovered some 7 or 10 years ago, which was busted by the police department in downtown Boston, of which Walter Corbett was associated. No sooner had they illuminated this insidious message that was hidden away for what must have been 5 or 10 years or more, than they heard the scurrying of tiny little paws against the plaster and the dirt and the dust. Running backwards, they were overwhelmed by a river of tiny red and black and dark grey rats that scurried over their bodies, nipping at them as they went. Both investigators were blooded and bruised from the encounter, suffering at the hands of these tiny little creatures which they could not get away from them. Screaming at the top of their lungs, they tried to attract the attention of the others, and indeed, after a couple of moments, the others that were upstairs, still engrossed in these terrible diaries, started to head back down the stairs to try and help their fallen comrades. Composing themselves, they went back to the hole in the wall and had a look. Indeed, there was the message. There must be something behind that wall. So, taking their collective effort, they punched a hole through the wall to open up a crawl space, and then punched a hole through the second wall to enable them to get into what seemed to be a large but barren room beyond. Covered in darkness, of course, there was no illumination. They started to look for what was there, and, in the centre of the room, on a wooden pallet, there was a body. It was small, white, in a suit. It looked like a middle-aged to elderly gentleman, covered in some sort of fine dust or face powder. As soon as they saw the body, they felt something change in the room. A quivering, a vibration in the room, some type of energy being unleashed. And suddenly, from the pocket of the author, the dagger that he'd secreted away made itself known. It flew out of there. It twisted and danced in the air. It seemed to hover and then point at one of the investigators and flew like a dagger in the night, cutting the investigator as it went past. It continued to do this as the investigators tried to dodge and weave their way out of its blade. In the middle of the room, the body started to move. Then, sitting up, you could see that there was something malevolent but alive in that body. Looking around, it looked at the investigators who, with their suspicions already cemented that there was something supernatural happening here, tried to attack that person, because it must have been that person that was causing this blade to dance in the night. Shots rang out, but this only caused more confusion and more dread as the bullets impacted the body that was sitting up, causing it to shatter in different places. All that did was show a veil of disgusting, blooded mass that started to worm its way insidiously into the minds of the investigators. They could feel their sanity draining away with every shot that they made, and no shot seemed to make a difference to the thing that was there. It could easily be just laughing this off. The blade kept on dancing, more people were cut, blood was starting to flow. Josiah, the alienist, started to hear a voice in his head. Help me. Do my bidding. Protect me. He was powerless to stop this, as his dull wits were no match for whatever power was coming up against them. He turned and started to strike at the others, striking the father and lashing out at the professor. Clear that there was some type of influence on him. His comrades would not shoot him, would not hurt him, but what could they do? Josiah was a big man. More gunshots at the man in the centre, looking now with pieces of his body falling to the floor, still being undeterred by whatever it was that these bullets were doing to it. The situation started to seem hopeless. The blade now found its way into the neck of the father, who crumpled to the floor close to death. Indeed, soon would die if he didn't receive some type of medical attention. But this was the moment for the jazz singer to be able to do something about this entire mess. Grabbing the dagger and pulling it from the neck of the father, he turned to the emaciated corpse of a man and flung the dagger into the man's chest. With a look of shock upon his destroyed face, whatever that man was had not anticipated that that blade would be used against him, and all of its power seemed to drain into him, collapsing the rest of his body into a pulp as it hit the floor with a slop, a gloop, a mess. But the threat was over. The father was tended to by the others. They managed to staunch the wound and revive the father. He was hurt badly, but they could get out of there. They saw that the thing on the floor was indeed gone, and that made everybody feel a little bit better. Josiah, who had been under the influence of some evil, malevolent force, seemed to snap out of it now. Could the others trust him, however? Would he be coming back? But they made their way out, taking with them the remains of anything that they could find which would back up this story. But of course, there is no backing up this story. This is a story to tell around the dinner table at the Order of the Silver Twilight. Surely this will impress somebody. Of that we shall see.